Hi Judith, how are you? Welcome to the Whaleoil Befoot second MP's interview.
Okay, Cameron, this is fun.
I've got some questions that some readers of my blog have sent in, which we'll cover. The first thing I want to cover, because it's timely, is just explore a bit around the Vietnam veterans issue and why you got involved in that.
Right. Well, I got involved because Ross Miller, who's someone I've known for a little while, he rang me up and said, "Look, I've been reading your maiden speech. I see you had a relative who went and served in Vietnam. Do you know anything about Agent Orange?" And I sort of said, "Well, I did. I heard something at some stage." Anyway, what happened is I got the map, the US Army map that John Masters had brought back from Vietnam, and put it in his attic. And I had a look at it, and I saw that the largest area of defoliation looked like it was at Nui Dat in the Phuoc Toi province where our troops were. And I thought, well, this is new information. So I took it to the National Party caucus. I said, we've got to open up this inquiry. There's been a McLeod inquiry that Labor had done when they first came into office, Reeves inquiry before that under National. Both of them said that where our guys were, there wasn't any spraying. And this evidence clearly seemed to indicate that that was wrong. So I got support, went to the Health Select Committee. Labor didn't actually control that Select Committee because we had only 2 people on it, but we had minor parties who were there, and I went and got their support first, went along to the Select Committee. Labor were trying to get the vote to happen just before Heather Roy from ACT came in, so that we would have lost the vote. Heather came in just before the vote, and we got the vote, and that's from then on that we took off, and that was how it started. So I got involved because it looked like injustice to me, and I just thought, it's the right thing to do. Let's find out the truth.
Well, it seems strange that governments of all persuasions for the last few years have denied what could really be described as the bleeding obvious. If you ask any veteran, they'll describe to you how they were soaked to the skin in this stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's good that it's been cleared and it's out, and a lot of the veterans say a lot of that is thanks to your efforts.
Well, that's very kind of them. I certainly had a part to play, and eventually I got made the spokesperson for Veterans Affairs, and I think that's just basically because I got so involved in it. What was really important too was that we actually had a public inquiry so that the veterans could come along and in public say what happened. And it wasn't just the Agent Orange that was the complaint that they had. It was the way that they were treated when they came back to New Zealand. And even when they were overseas, one of the, I remember this guy giving evidence that when he was overseas, his parents got a parcel in the mail, and when they opened it up, it was a dead rat. And in that box was also a note saying, "This is your son." And that's the way that those people were treated. When they came back, they had a march in 1971, I think it was, up Queen Street, and John Masters was assaulted. He fought back and, as I recall, actually got into trouble with the police over it. It's a sort of behaviour that New Zealanders need to be utterly ashamed of. So that was the thing I think that hurt them the most.
Yes, 1971 was the 161 battery welcome home down Queen Street.
Correct.
In which the progressive youth movement was front and centre in abusing the troops, of which 2 current members of the cabinet, from the Prime Minister and Phil Goff, were members of the progressive youth movement and involved in spitting in the faces and throwing paint on the soldiers.
Yeah.
So,
well, my view is every one of those people should say sorry, and they should mean it, and they shouldn't couch it with sorry if you got upset. They should say sorry for what they did. Those actions were despicable.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a relative who was in Vietnam who was spat in the face by one of them. He holds that very personally, and when you mention the name of the person who did it in his presence, he bristles. Spitting is a horrendous thing, and I believe they should say sorry as well. Now on to some other questions, as we covered the Vietnam issue. Your major area of responsibility is social welfare.
That's right.
We've certainly got some challenges when we take over government in welfare. What would you think are the biggest challenges in welfare?
There's a couple of really big challenges. One pretty obvious one is why it is that we have 130,000 working age New Zealanders too sick to work, a 50% increase under Labour. So one of the big challenges is to make sure that the sickness and invalids benefit is correctly paid to those who need it for as long as they need it, but that others are not actually funneled onto those benefits because it's an easy option or seen like that. So that's going to be the one big challenge, and it's one that I think we've got some plans for.
I think maybe one of the increases in the invalids benefit comes about from Labour's changes to the employment law concerning handicapped people. An example is my brother-in-law. He worked in a sheltered workshop 5 days a week. At the end of the week he was paid $50. The law that came in said he had to be paid the minimum wage. That made the workshop unviable and is now closed down. So he doesn't get that $50 anymore. He's largely on the invalids benefit now. And further, they've now restricted the amount of time he can spend coming home from his family because of the allowances around the statutory holidays, etc.
It's one of the really cruel ironies that when Labour brought in those changes to the sheltered workshop laws, they did so supposedly on the basis of helping the very people whose jobs they took away. I've been to see what's happened to some of the work that was involved. In Hawera recently, I went to see some people working with IHC who had been running a big recycling plant, and when the laws changed, that all went, and it went off to some other commercial outfit somewhere else. But what it did is it utterly destroyed those people being able to have their business and to have their activity and be part of a contributing society. And I just think it was cruel, it was stupid, it was ideologically based, and it didn't take into account that there are all different variations and degrees of intellectual handicap, disability. So what they did is they just said, well, one size fits all, and therefore did those people out of their jobs.
Well, I mean, those people are they're handicapped for a start, and then the law comes along and handicaps them again. And I've seen it up close and personal, that their pride in having a job, no matter what it was, has been stripped away from them. And I'm interested to know whether National's got any plans around that law, any amendments to it, or...
Well, it's not forming part of our policy at this stage, Cameron, but I have to say that we voted against it. We voted against it all the way through, and we spoke against it. And one of the things that we found difficult to deal with were that so many people who were the heads of the organisations involved with those with intellectual disabilities many of them were promoting the government's policy on it. So we were trying to do our best for the families who contacted us, and yet the heads of organisations said, oh no, we want this because everyone's the same. Well, it just they're going to need to work out what it is that they actually want from their community.
I mean, the thing is every handicapped person out there actually votes. So does their mother, their father, their brothers and sisters, and people I speak to that are, and I've got a few friends that are in the same boat. They all say the same thing: that the destruction of the pride of their child, whether their child's 30 or 40 or whatever, has been appalling. And it's another case of poorly written law with unintended consequences.
Yeah, well, I think it's another case of ideology overcoming the practicalities.
We've got some questions for some readers that'll cover a whole range of issues. This first one's come from an ACT supporter that reads my blog and asks, why do you think the National Party has had such difficulty selecting and retaining female candidates?
I don't think we have. I think I'm an example of someone we have selected and retained, and I'm not going anywhere. I think what he's saying is that we've had a couple of reasonably high-profile women who have said, look, I've had enough of politics. Well, actually, so have Labour, but I guess that nobody notices when theirs go. So we also have men that decide that after a short time they don't want to go. I mean, Mark Blumsky's one of those people, came in and decided not long after he came in that it actually wasn't really where he wanted to be. So I think we have it in both. I think the fact is that the Labour Party always wants to paint us as anti-women, and they keep ignoring the fact that we were the party that gave them the first woman Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Jenny Shipley, a fact they completely ignore.
Yes.
And that really riles them because they want Helen Clark to have been that. Well, she wasn't. Jenny was.
Yes, they like putting in the first elected Prime Minister.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we don't elect the Prime Minister.
No, they forgot that actually that's elected by a caucus.
Yes. In Auckland, the National seems to have selected quite a few women, in fact. We've got yourself here in this electorate. Neighbouring electorate, we've got Pansy Wong.
That's right.
In Botany. Auckland Central has Nikki Kay.
Correct.
We've got Paula Bennett out west.
Yes. So these are all good women. And the thing is that they're all good, strong women, and not one of them is there because of her gender. They're all there because they're the best person for the job. And I think when would the Labour Party ever put Ashford Chowdhury, for instance, if you're going to look at, say, Asian MPs as well, where would they even put him? Well, frankly, at the end of the list is where I put him, way off, not even on it. But we've got someone like Pansy Wong, who is a top MP. I mean, she's in our top 20. She's been there for quite some years now, and she's such a hard worker.
Dogged and feisty.
Absolutely, and she's in a seat like Botany, which I think she will do really well in. And she's just so hard working. She's on the phone all the time saying, let's go this and that, coming with me to all sorts of things. She's great. And we've got Nikki Kay, who in Auckland Central, who I'm absolutely certain is going to be the next MP for Auckland Central. I think the people of Auckland Central are embarrassed to have Judith Tizard as their MP, and well should they be. I think it's really awful for them to have to watch Judith Tizard as Associate Minister of Transport easing herself out of a BMW car and then saying she didn't notice what sort of car it was. It's just embarrassing. And Paula Bennett's doing a great job out in West Auckland.
And of course there's Jackie Blue in Roskill as well.
And of course Jackie Blue in Mount Roskill, and Jackie is her septum person. She's the one who's brought breast cancer into the political arena, and the National Party is very proud to have Jackie as part of our team.
Oh, and she's someone at the top of her game and left that to go into politics. You have to admire people who do that.
I mean, we've got people like that, and if you look at our candidates, they're invariably people who have achieved before they came to Parliament, and they're people who, having done that, have decided that they can give something back, as opposed to when you look at the left. I mean, it's very difficult to find any of them who where being an MP wouldn't be the best paid job they've ever seen or come across, and because they're from the trade unions and the primarily. So unfortunately, they just haven't achieved much. Trade unions or teachers? Yes, although some good teachers are great, but I haven't seen too many there in the Labour Party.
Okay, here's another one. They've suggested the correct answer here, but I won't tell you what that is. Name your favourite former national politician.
Oh, my favourite former need to be alive?
No, just not currently in Parliament.
Not currently in Parliament. Well,
have several if you've got some equals.
Yeah, I really, I like Jenny Shipley a lot. I have a lot to do. Well, not a lot to do with Jenny, but I do talk to Jenny quite a bit. I like her. She's a very strong, feisty person. Wasn't everyone's cup of tea, but I like the fact that you knew what she stood for, and I think that's important. I like Jim McClay. I think he's an intelligent person who's very positive towards us, the National Party. Always liked Don Brash a lot. Very principled person, Don, and actually probably almost too nice for Parliament. Really, really good person. In terms of other people, I'm thinking, there's loads of them. I mean, most of them I like, actually. With the odd one where I think,
Yes.
But mostly good people who actually gave a lot more than they ever got from politics.
Great. Here's one just for the female readers of the blog. Who's the sexiest male MP?
Ah, well, I don't really think about them in that terms.
It'll be a short list, I imagine.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought. I mean, I just don't look at them like that. I'm sorry.
Okay, and when was the last time you actually spoke to Helen Clark, and what did you say?
Oh, right. Well, I spoke to her a couple of days after Anzac Day when we were in Australia, she and I, for the opening of the Anzac Bridge in Sydney. And I spoke to her after the event when I went to say, hello, Helen. And I said, thank you for making sure I was here, because I knew that the Labour Party had tried to keep me away from the Anzac Bridge opening and had invited John Key as Leader of the Opposition until I'd got a bit of a story going around it, and then suddenly at the last minute an invitation appeared. So I did say thank you, and I said I thought it was a very good day. So, well, which is all true. But
I was a bit perplexed about that, just to touch on that. Unveiling a statue on the Anzac Bridge commemorating Anzacs. Why wasn't it done on Anzac Day?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, it was on the 27th, so
yeah,
it was a strange day. Maybe it was just because there were so many other things going on, but...
Well, Anzac Day in Sydney is a huge party. Yeah. I've been there a couple of times.
I'm not sure they certainly didn't allow the public on the bridge, which I thought was a shame.
I would have thought a public holiday would have been better.
But they said it was something to do with security, but I don't know.
Here's a bit of a funny question. Whose column is a better read? Cactus Kate or Tapu Misa?
Well, I actually read both. I think it's always good to read both sides of everything, and I always like to keep an eye on the left because it's good to know what they're saying. In
1999 there was a referendum about tougher penalties for crime. Labor says that they've delivered on that referendum. What's your view on that, and what do you feel? I know it's not your policy area, but what do you feel or think that the National Party is going to follow through on with that?
Well, I think one of the things that Labor said is that they were going to deliver tougher penalties for crime, and they did, except, and here's the problem, is that they then allowed criminals to come out and get parole after serving only a third of their sentence. So before it had been 2/3 their sentence. So what they did is they increased the penalties, and then they let them out after only a third of the time. So they let them out actually ultimately earlier than what they would have under a national government. So it was cynical, manipulative, and frankly typical Labor. And in terms of what we're going to do, well, there's a few policies that we've already announced in terms of youth justice in particular. I should say too, is in the welfare area it has a really big, certainly is a correlation between intergenerational welfare dependency and all bad outcomes in health, education, and youth justice. So if you can start to deal with that intergenerational welfare dependency, you might actually start dealing with some youth justice issues, which is one of the other big challenges we've got. We've certainly said that we'll have fresh start camps for young offenders, and some people in the media have called those boot camps, but we're not, we're calling them fresh start. And
my readers will call it boot camps, and I don't think they care too much whether they are or not.
Well, they will. But I think that what we do see is that for some young people, who are off the rails and who have always generally been off the rails, they've never had anyone who's cared enough to say no. They've never had anyone who's cared enough to make sure they got out of bed. They've never had anyone who cared enough to actually get them fed properly. So they need discipline and they need respect. They need to have self-respect before we expect them to have respect for others. So I think that those are really important. Another big challenge from that is going to be what happens with them once they come out of those places. They actually no point bringing them out and then sending them straight back home to the same environment they had before. So we've got to have career paths that we can get them through on, into other things. But we've also, said, well, we'll have more police and we'll give them proper powers, give them tasers as long as that trial comes out fine, which we think it will. We don't see anything wrong with tasers when it comes to their use. They're an awful lot better than guns. And if you get it wrong with a taser, you're likely not to kill someone.
Yes, that's what I've, being an expert in firearms myself, I'd rather be hit with a taser than with a bullet from a Glock.
Yeah,
you tend not to survive bullets.
Well, precisely, and I'd rather not be hit by anything. If we're going to have something, and might as well be there. So those are some of the things, but also I think there's a lot of New Zealanders who think, look, Labour's built a lot more prisons, but that's because there's a lot more crime, and there's a lot more violent crime, and there's a lot less done about it, and the political correctness in the police I just actually find just nauseating. The way that so many of those officers are now practically forced to bend over backwards for young criminals and not hurt their feelings. I just find that just awful. I mean, demoralising for them. So a little less of that. I mean, I raised this as an issue probably about a year ago, when the police in South Auckland, there was a contingent sent down to Mary to go with a water truck to spray water along the road so that they could lift spirits. And I suggested they might be better spending their time going around lifting burglars. But that's the sort of thing, that excruciating political correctness. That
yes.
And it comes from the hierarchy.
Animism.
Yeah, yes, that too, but it comes from the hierarchy within the police, and that all comes from the government of the day, of course. So
there's some challenges there.
There are some challenges.
Back to welfare. Labour screams from the rooftops how well they've done with unemployment and how well they've done with welfare in general. I find it amusing. I'm interested in your perspective, that despite the drop in unemployment, and there's some question over the statistics in that, we have a bigger budget than ever in welfare, and surely if we have less people dependent on benefits, we need less people managing the people who are dependent on benefits. And that's definitely in your...
Yes, well, we had a vast increase in the number of bureaucrats shuffling papers. I saw Ruth Dyson admitting on television just recently that only a third of the 9,000 staff in the Ministry of Social Development, which is what they call social welfare, only a third of them are frontline staff. Now, she thought that was a great figure. You'd think it would be the other way around, it'd be 2/3, but no, only a third. So there's a huge bureaucracy and massive amounts of money spent on reports that nobody reads. And in fact, you can't even get the government to say how many reports they've done on various things or what they are or list them. Last time we asked about the single core benefit, which has been their major policy plank through the last two elections. Still not delivered, and they said there are over 400 reports that they've done on it and they couldn't list them all because it was too many. So what does that tell us? There's an awful lot of paper being shuffled, and a lot of people who have been getting a lot of money as consultants and otherwise, and experts, so-called experts, when they could have just actually given the money back to taxpayers. So,
well, I don't know if it's giving money back to taxpayers. I think we prefer on the right-hand side of the blogs
so just to leave it there
to say not take it from us in the first
place. Tax cuts. Well, one of the issues with the unemployment rate is, and there are less people unemployed, we know that, is that governments don't create jobs unless it's in social welfare, unless it's in the government itself and the bureaucracy. They don't create the economy, out there. They don't do anything like that. And we have in New Zealand been benefiting from the same sort of trends that have been in other developed countries around the world, which is growing economy, jobs available. And we've had a lot of people coming into the country, we've had housing going up, all that's created the environment. Well, what's happened now is that all of a sudden things are slowing. They're slowing quite substantially. So just the other week, 29,000 people had lost their jobs in the first quarter of the year. The statistics came out. That was the biggest drop in employment since 1989.
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw the Labour Party press release that said that was fantastic.
Yeah. Well, Ruth Dyson said that. She said, I think the quote was something like this: well, I think that's not bad news, really," and that was what she said. And then she kept on saying in Parliament that that's not bad news. Well, I would have thought that was bad news if you're the one who's lost the job, and it's actually bad news for all the other people that come, around that. So there are jobs that are going. Now, what concerns me, of course, is that when we've had really good economic times, that was the time to actually deal with people getting them well, who are on the sickness benefit, making sure they should only be there and not back working. But they haven't. They've just opened that whole area up, got people off the unemployment benefit and got them into others. And all sorts of silly training schemes that go nowhere. They'd end up with student loans. It's just getting up further and further into debt. So I just feel it's been a wasted opportunity in the last 9 years, and they've been cynical and manipulative, just like they did with the law and order issues. Just basically lied.
If you talk about poverty and talk about working for families, the stock talking points from the left and from Labour are that it's never been better, that we've raised people out of poverty, and working for families has contributed to that. I live and work in South Auckland, and I see the same people living in the same houses that they were 9 years ago, doing the same things with the same neighbours in the same neighbourhood. I don't see any changes. What's your view on that?
Yeah, my view is that the poor have got poorer, actually, and the rich have got richer under a Labour government. The people who get the $200,000 salaries, at Ministry of Social Development, the 24 or so of those who get that, they're not the people who most New Zealanders would think were the people we were trying to benefit. But they're the ones who have gone from none getting that sort of salary to now 20 odd of them. I think what we're also seeing is that if you are on a benefit and you've got children, you're likely to be living in poverty. And so what's happened is that we still have 185,000 children of beneficiaries, and so we've got 185,000 kids in poverty. What hasn't happened is that people have not been given the dignity of working, and they've been in fact just basically left on benefits when they didn't need to be. And that's what I see as the most awful thing, because there have been jobs and there have been opportunities, but they've just been left there. And it's, the Labour Party and Ruth Dyson and people like that, they get their votes out of people feeling that they're at the bottom of the heap. They don't get their votes out of people, who come from state houses like John Key did, raise themselves up, take opportunities that are there, work hard and do well. They get their, they are counting, unfortunately, Labour Party, that a whole lot of people will feel that they have no options in life and their only option is to vote for Labour.
Yes, it's sad really. I see it almost every day in South Auckland, and their lives have not improved.
No.
And I just wish sometimes that the Labour Party would climb off their pedestal and actually go into those electorates and see how people's lives are.
What I think is the most despicable thing about the current lot of the Labour Party is that you see them despising the very people that vote for them. And I think that's one of the most disgraceful things I see of people like Ruth Dyson and others. When I first came to Parliament, I was giving a speech about domestic purposes benefit, because Labour removed the requirement that mums whose children were sick would go and get a part-time job or training, which National had put in place. And she talked about all National was trying to do is get people to do low-end jobs, degrading jobs, things like flipping burgers at the McDonald's or whatever. Those aren't low-end degrading jobs, they're a good job. They're a job that gets someone started on a road. And what she was saying is effectively was, if you haven't got a university degree, then you're not worth anything. And that's an awful thing, and it's wrong. You can't have a civilised society if you don't have people who are going to make the roads, and you don't have people who are going to be the electricians, and you don't have people who are the plumbers, and you don't have people who serve in shops. The fact is, everyone has a place to, and a job to play. But they're so, I have to say that they're so distant from normal people, ordinary people, and they think that ordinary people are too stupid to be able to make up their own minds, to have some aspiration in life, to choose who to vote for, to think they can have something better. They actually despise the very people who vote for them. That's why I really dislike them.
Well, in 1999, Helen Clark said that when they brought in their rich prick tax, that 5% of New Zealand's population earned over 60,000.
Yeah.
And while she thought that was fantastic and taxable, I thought that was an indictment on where New Zealand had ended up and where we are now, where only 5%, and I think it's 12% now, earn over 60,000. And I personally believe in an economy that enables people to earn as much as they can, to keep as much as they can, and yet still provide some basic social services.
Yeah.
Would that be your view as well?
Yeah, pretty much. I think most New Zealanders, I think, do think that you've got to have a reasonable, a good, really, public health system and education, police and all that. So most people think that if someone is unwell, they can't work, that we should have something there for them. They think if you can't get a job, we don't want people out doing soup kitchen stuff out on the streets. I don't think many New Zealanders would disagree with that. But what they don't want is they don't want this attitude that if you're not part of the ruling elite, which is the Labour Party, then frankly you've got to be happy with what you've got and grateful. And that's the other thing, is that they think everyone needs to be grateful to them. Well, the difference is that in our positions as MPs, we actually have to be grateful to the people who pay for us and who vote for us, and they've forgotten that. They actually don't expect much from people. They don't expect that people will want to have a nice house or have a nice car or be able to get their children to travel overseas and see things. They don't think that's normal. That as long as they're okay, that's all that matters. And I think they're wrong. People do want to have those things, and good on them for doing it, because it sets up really good behaviours.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the last question. It covers this year and how it's panning out, and comparisons with 1999.
Right. Well, I wasn't in Parliament in 1999, but I certainly was a voter and involved. I became involved in the National Party again in 1999. What I see is that people have switched off, just like they switched off from National in 1999, got too arrogant, lost touch, and had started to bore people. And you can see it now with Labour. They're very arrogant. They're making all sorts of strange decisions. Buying the BMW cars so they could swan around in them. That was a really weird decision. They've lost touch, and I think people are just turning away from them. We see them now openly saying to us things like, individually saying things like, oh well, when you take over, this is what you're going to have to deal with, things like that. Now we're not saying that, they're saying it, because we say, well, polls are great at the moment, but polls are only a poll, it's not the election day. So we've got to keep going on treating everything as though every single vote counts, because it does.
Great, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.